Hello, welcome everyone for joining us, and thank you RHY for having us host this conference. You all are working with Latinx families in the LGBTQ plus youth. My name is Rocio Carranza. I use she, her pronouns. I'm part of Cocoon House. I'm the director of family engagement. And before I pass it along to other presenters, I just want to honor the land we are presenting by. We're on Coast Salish land here in the Pacific Northwest. And then just some housekeeping things. At the end of the presentation, there'll be an opportunity for folks to come off mic or type in their question in the chat. So please hold your questions until the end. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll pass it on to the other presenters to present themselves.
My name is Laura Murillo. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a family support advocate at Cocoon House in the prevention department.
Hello, my name is Marco Perez, and I go by he, him.
Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just gonna start a little bit talking about Cocoon House in our organization. So Cocoon House was started in 1991 by actually a high school counselor here in the area who saw that there was a need for a safe place for youth who were experiencing homelessness. So one thing that she was able to do was gather funding, and she actually was reached out by the Everett Lions Club about a house that they had, and they sold it to her for $1. So since then we've been open. That was known as Central. Now it houses our prevention department, which we'll be talking about, and our host home program. And then from there it just grew. And it grew with these principles in mind: community, equity, respect, growth, advocacy, leadership, and safety. And these values really came to be after talking to staff, youth, and community members. We all found that these were core in the work that we do. And then to keep every person in our community safe and thriving. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the services we offer at Cocoon House. Next, please. So we have an outreach department. In our outreach department, we do street outreach, our advocates. We also have a drop-in center called Youth Trim, where youth are allowed to come in, get a hot meal, take a shower, wash their clothes. We also have fun events and things going on. We have a music room at a Youth Trim where youth and young people can come and record if music is their thing. We also connect them to advocates, whether they need to get a license, whether they look for housing. We definitely connect them to those resources at our U-turn. Next, please. Prevention. So we're going to be talking a little bit about prevention later on, just because the majority of our discussion will discuss this. Next one, please. So youth housing. This is our main building is called the Hub, and it's near downtown Everett. And this is where on the second floor we house our 12 to 17-year-olds for transitional housing. There are 20 units. And we also, in youth housing, just launched during the pandemic our first host homes program, which we thought was really needed because this is a way to involve not only the community, but is more sustainable of a model. Next one, please. We also have our young adult housing. We actually are the only one in the state that houses 18 to 24-year-olds. It's a 20 units. We provide rapid rehousing, coordinated entry, and we also offer case management if that's something that folks are looking for. Next, please. And then finally, our employment and education department, we actually also launched this program during the pandemic, and it is really in partnership with local businesses and community colleges. We have training programs with local businesses. The youth and young people can find different pathways into a career. They can do internship and work experiences. One of the ones that we are really lucky to have a partnership with the Everett Community College here in Everett called the Onward program, and where we register a young person who's interested in finishing school and taking college classes. They provide housing and tuition is provided by the Everett Community College. Next, please. Next. But today we're really going to focus on early support for young people who are at risk of becoming homeless. When Cocoon first started back in the 90s, it was really focused on youth housing. But earlier on, the agency realized that housing was only the beginning of breaking the cycle of homelessness. The agency needed to provide support to family before the youth ran away, because more times than not, resolving family conflict is what is needed for the youth to feel supported and heard. Next slide, please. And so I think when talking about prevention work, the prevention program, as we all know, as a nation, is hard to fund. I like to say, we fund the Band-Aid, the crisis at the moment, but we're not very good at preventing many things in this country. And so we here at Cocoon House are very committed to prevention work. And we found some creative ways to actually fund this through RHY grant, the BCPP grant. And we use this in a creative form by partnering with our emergency housing and host homes programs and engaging like families towards reconciliation. And so we have 21 days in shelter. So when a young person comes in, ages between 11 and 17, they might be looking for housing. And so they have 21 days at our shelters, whether that's host homes or emergency shelter. And in those 21 days, we provide not only meet their needs for basic needs such as food, clothing, medical care, mental health, but we also connect them to an advocate. Many of the youth and young people that we work with have a lot of family conflict going on. And so we really connect them with our family advocates, and this is the good opportunity to do it. We provide through our family advocate, individual, group, and family counseling, which we will dive deeper later on in this presentation about. We also do outside referrals. So whether that's through local organizations or connecting families with therapy, our family advocate does that. Crisis intervention, many of the times you will hear many stories later on today. Many of the families are in crisis, and we really try to talk through with either the young person or the family or the caregivers about their options and resources and timelines, so that we can interrupt this and really feeling like they're supported and heard. And then recreational programs, we connect with outside organizations and other resources. Our family advocates are able to do that. And then we provide aftercare service after they exited our program in 6 months. And so after a family and a young person have left our program, we do aftercare every the 3, 6, and 9 months after exit. Next slide, please. Okay, so I have a question for y'all, and feel free to put it in the chat. How many young people in the US are disconnected? The word disconnected means not engaged from school, job, or job trainings. And what percentage do you all think Latinx youth are disconnected in our country? So feel free to just put in chat if you have any numbers. I have Raven who said 45 to 65%, okay, 45 to 60, 10%, 33%. Okay. Okay, white youth possibly 10%. 5. Okay, yeah, thank you all for sharing. Can I have the next slide, please? So here we have a chart from Measure America discussing youth disconnection. Like I said, it's young people who are not engaged in some type of education or job or training program. First on the top, you will see that youth who live in poverty are 30.9% likely to be disconnected from these systems, and only 16.5% are connected to whether that's education or a job. Then you can look lower that the chart divides it by race. On the far left, you have Asian and white youth who have lower rates of disconnection, or in other words, are connected to school or some type of job. On the far right, you can see that Native youth and Black youth are the most disconnected. And that's due to the systemic and historical racism that we see in this country. And then before that, you see that Native and Black women are next with disconnection rates. So then we're really focusing on Latinx young people, which are in the middle at 14%. And one thing that I want to say about this, so Latinx is an ethnicity, not in race. So this data could be skewed because Latinx people come from different races, and so we could have someone who identifies as Latinx, but can also be Black or Native. So there's some skewness in that. Next slide, please.
So our next question here that you all can answer in the chat or aloud if you feel comfortable with that is, what might be some of the reasons for LGBTQ plus youth disconnection and homelessness? And what about Latinx LGBTQ plus youth? Lack of family support and resources, religion and cultural boundaries, discrimination, conflict with family members, knowledge of programs, family and culture, family disownment, lack of competent, adequate healthcare, lack of access to HRT. Okay. Yeah, so a lot of you are definitely talking about what we will be presenting today. And we're going to go over that, but specifically the intersectionality of it. Next slide, please. So as you can see, LGBTQ plus youth make up 7% of the US population. And yet they make up 40% of all young people experiencing homelessness. For today, we looked at a Trevor Project report, and they used a 2021 national survey about the mental health of LGBTQ plus youth. And it was found that 27% of Latinx LGBTQ youth reported experiencing homelessness and or housing instability in their lives. Latinx LGBTQ youth were 30% more likely to report a suicide attempt in the past year compared to non-Latinx LGBTQ youth. And LGBTQ youth who worry a lot about themselves or family member being detained or deported due to immigration policies were at double the risk of attempting suicide compared to Latinx LGBTQ youth who never worried about it. Next slide, please. Oh, looks like we're having some technical difficulties, so we'll go ahead and wait. There we go. So as you all mentioned, causes are the lack of support and acceptance. It happens at home for many reasons. One of the highest reasons that we see a lot of Latinx families coming to us for services is family conflict. And we will go over each one of these individually. Next slide, please. So lack of understanding comes from education and environment. When we talk about education, we are looking at two things: the level of education of the caregivers or the family, and education around understanding their LGBTQ plus youth. Caregivers often don't understand terminology of the LGBTQ plus community, or, quote unquote, how it happens. And that can bring up a lot of frustration and feelings of grief. Sometimes they blame themselves or wonder if they could have prevented the situation. Oftentimes caregivers are immigrants from different countries who did not have the opportunity to finish school in their home country, and some may be illiterate. This means that they may want to learn more, but finding resources can be hard because they can't read the materials. And to add on to that, sometimes materials are not in their language. Having someone explain to them and talk to them makes a world of difference for the youth and the parents, which brings up language barriers. Many youth struggle talking about their identities with their caregivers because they are learning about themselves in an all English environment. When it comes to sitting down with their caregivers and talking about themselves, they find themselves struggling to explain the terminology. Another barrier is that Spanish is a very gendered language, so it adds to the difficulty of translating English phrases exactly, especially acronyms. Additionally, not all Latinx families speak Spanish fluently. Spanish can be their second language because they may speak an indigenous language. And lastly, environment. There are generational gaps, especially with Latinx families sometimes living in multi-generational households, which can make it more difficult for the youth to want to discuss their identity. Cultural gaps. Their beliefs and views are shaped by living in a different country during a different time. Next slide, please. As somebody wrote in the comments, religion, a large portion of the population of Latinx folks are practicing Catholics or Christians as a result of colonization, which affects the views and the level of acceptance the family may have about the identity of their youth, which we will get into that a little bit more in the next slide. Often caregivers come from conservative backgrounds. This means that sexual orientation and gender is not something families discuss at all, even if they have heard that any member of their family is a part of the LGBTQ plus community. It was not talked about in past generations, but it is something that is slowly changing. Machismo culture. Machismo culture is the societal belief within Latinx culture that men are superior to women and really drives the gender norms and expectations within the culture. So it's something that we may have heard before. Misogyny, it exists outside of the Latinx culture, but it has its own term within our culture. So that, means that women serve men are strong providers, women are the homemakers. You can also find, though, that sometimes they may be matriarchal homes, where the eldest woman is the one that decides what happens within the family. However, queerness really does challenge all of these societal dynamics and puts them into question for families. Next slide, please. Internet, media, and public figures. So in Latinx culture, being a part of the LGBTQ plus community is looked down upon in so many ways. There are a lot of everyday expressions that are homophobic, that are used, as everyday vernacular. And very often they are perpetuated in media platforms and by public figures. Individuals are ridiculed to no end about their gender expression, or if they choose to wear anything out of their gendered clothing and accessory norms, not excluding things like if you decide to pamper yourself, what sports you decide to play, and what media you decide to consume. Colonization plays a big part in the lack of representation. We see it in social media, more white Latinx hosts, actors, movie stars. There are no Black actors, much less LGBTQ plus identifying folks, unless they are white Latino gay men, in which case we again see the effects of colonization. The white Latinx gay man is always ridiculed and the laughing stock of the show. And there is very limited representation. Some of the representation we're going to talk about right now, as you can see, are also white Latinx individuals. For the first one I'm going to talk about is Frida Kahlo. She's one of the earliest bisexual women who I heard about, who I identified with, and she was an artist. Second, we have Juan Gabriel. He was a singer-songwriter. He never fully addressed his sexuality, but when he was asked about it, he would say things like, you don't ask what you can see. And he really lived outside of these societal norms and was proud of his heritage and who he was. He was ridiculed a lot, but he had a lot of love for his fans and he was always motivated by them to keep going. And in more modern times, we have Bad Bunny. He is a Puerto Rican music artist who has described himself as an ally, as well as fluid. When asked about his sexuality, because he lives so much outside of the gender norms, he said, you never know. Right now I am heterosexual, but you never know if that will change in the future. And he consistently uses his platform to call out homophobia, misogyny, and transphobia. But these are just a few of the media representation that we have in Latinx community. Many LGBTQ plus Latinx activists that were and are out there leading and doing the work, who are not in the spotlight. Social media is changing this a little bit, but there are so many before them and even younger ones who are doing the work right now. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I have another question for y'all. What are some systemic barriers to youth disconnection and homelessness? If you want to type it in the chat, feel free, or come off mic, that's also fine. Lack of healthcare and resources, systemic racism, homophobia, transphobia, lack of gender inclusive resources, healthcare. For a couple few. Limited financial resources, the judicial system, yep. Thank you, yes. We'll talk a little bit about this. Next slide, please. Lack of transportation, i.e. forms need to be handled in a location that is not within walking distance, lack of internet, the systems which prioritize housing are biased. Yep. Thank y'all. Next, please. So I just wanted to show you right here, we have a conceptual model of youth connection and disconnection. It's from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And all these barriers that you all were talking, like you said, are products of systemic problems in the federal, state, and local level. On the left side, we have protective factors that prevent disconnection. On the right side, we have risk factors for disconnection. And so I'm going to be starting off with the risk factors, starting with societal and policy. We can see that we have structural racism, income inequality. For example, drug and gun control policies that disproportionately target BIPOC communities. Some of you mentioned the lack of mental health or healthcare services in Black and Brown communities. Another good example about this that leads to, BIPOC communities not having the adequate healthcare resources is redlining. And so we all see this in the policy level. Moving on to community, we have the neighborhood violence and lack of trust. And so redlining, as I discussed, goes into neighborhood violence, poverty, and then the lack of trust really from service providers due to unjust treatment in the past, like we now have seen, like the Tuskegee Airmen, more recently, COVID vaccines, and we see the mistrust of BIPOC communities. And then we have school and friends level. We have high school rates of school dropouts and suspension, which disproportionately affect especially Black youth, Native youth, because many of the dropout and suspension practices that schools do comes during an era of school segregation and boarding schools. And so that's why we see them disproportionately being affected by this. Then we have family, parental incarceration. And as we know, Black men in this country are disproportionately incarcerated. But I also wanted to add, and specifically because we're talking about Latinx communities, a parent being detained in a detention center. I know Laura talked about it a little bit, how our LGBTQIA plus youth feel anxious if they come from a mixed status family or themselves are undocumented. And then finally, when we get to the individual level, we can see how all these barriers really lead to a young person having trouble with their low emotional self-regulation. And that's when we get families in crisis because they have all these other needs that are not being met first. And parents don't know, or caregivers and family don't know how to best support the youth. But on the left side, on protective factors, I think it is important to talk about them. We always talk about risk factors and we forget the protective factors that in our own communities we have to offset these risk factors. So in the society and policy level, protective factors include access and employment and education opportunities. This can really be like provided by either nonprofits, other community level opportunities. Like I said, we partner with Everett Community College in providing, free tuition and housing for youth. Then we have neighborhood cohesion. I think it's really important here to discuss the resiliency and strength of BIPOC communities. We always look, like I said, on the risk factors. But for example, in the Latinx community, there's a really huge mistrust in banks and our money. And so growing up, and I've heard from young people also that their caretakers and family still practice this system of savings where You can have 10 families involved where one person is the lead in collecting, let's say, $100 a month from all the other 9 families. And it really goes into like them saving that money. And then that money goes to every month to a different family within those families that are saving. And so this really is like our young people seeing this can be a form of resource and learning from their community. Then we have school and friends, which is supportive teacher, pro-social peers. And I think right here is really important to discuss, you know, staff and service providers within our agencies, within schools, within our systems that not only look like our youth and have lived experience like our young people, but also understand these systemic barriers and what equity looks like within their agency, within their institution, and really working towards that. And then on the family level, parental support and engagement. I think this one is one that we lack. As we have seen in our prevention work, families are really left on their own to, you know, be a caregiver. And a lot of people, especially in the Latinx community, we know that it takes more than the caregiver to, like they say, it takes a whole village to raise a child. And I think that is a big protective factor we have in the Latinx community, just because we come from maybe other countries where even the first 40 days of postpartum, the woman, the birth person is supposed to stay in bed for 40 days. And not do anything, just be there to feed their child. And that's when all the aunties or the mothers, grandmothers, everyone steps in to provide the food, provide the chores, the care, the everything else that the birth person might have been doing if they didn't have the support. And then an individual level, this all leads for the young person to have high motivation and academic achievement. But I also wanted to add, this also encourages young people to be empowered and have pride in their culture and where they come from. Next slide, please.
So as Rocio was discussing, you know, having families in crisis is who we have in most of our case management. And one of the things that we often discuss are ACEs and intergenerational trauma. And this goes along with looking at the intersectionality of our family's trauma. They are in crisis mode. And when you are in crisis mode, for the majority of the time, it is very difficult to see beyond your basic needs if they are not being met. And the caregiver's trauma can often take a toll on the young person. Either the young person does not decide to come out to the caregiver and discuss their identity because they don't want to add more stress to the caregiver's life, or the youth is scared of not being fully accepted and being blamed for the caregiver's trauma. Many Latinx caregivers work jobs that are the most difficult, low-paid jobs, and sometimes work multiple jobs to survive. So they do not have time to support their young person when they are just trying to keep them fed and warm. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be discussing our prevention services. The first one being we try to have low barrier, supportive, and affirming services. Next. And you can go ahead and like load this entire page. We also offer education. So it can either be parents attending our parenting workshops or helping parents or the youth with school enrollment or school support, as well as helping them seek out employment, seek out resources, whether that's financial or food resources in the community. Referral to healthcare for the youth and the family. As we all know, it is very hard to get healthcare if you are not documented. So there are clinics in the area that offer either healthcare and counseling based on, I think it's donation. Sometimes it's free if the family can't afford it, but it's very low pay if they're, I think it's like $10 to get them into those services. Referral to legal services in the area, whether it's pro bono or just free legal advice. Our employees or coworkers are all often trained on being trauma informed and intersectionality informed. And again, referral to mental health services and emotional support to other organizations that are in the area that support families that may not have insurance or are very, they're low, sliding scale fee. That's also a really good one that we connect our families to. Next slide, please.
Okay, so how do we make this work possible? In our prevention department, we try to incorporate best practices when working with young people and their families. And these are the ones we utilize very often: asset-based approach, trauma-informed care, and positive youth development. And we'll be going in deeper in the next slides. Next slide, please. So beginning with asset-based approach, as you listened about, if you all listened about our services, you can see that we really focus on internal assets, which includes the individual and family assets through supporting the young person and building confidence in who they are, their self-esteem, leading them to feel more confident in their life, decisions, and ultimately having like the self-determination and the self-efficacy to make decisions in their life and just be leaders in their life. An example of this, Laura has been doing a lot of work in finding resources in supporting young people in finding the right pronouns and names in Spanish. Like we discussed, Spanish is a very gendered language. And so there's a lot of resources out there that provide this context, and also having this discussion with families helps. And then within the family assets, this is where our family meetings are really key component because it provides a space for the caregiver and the young people to reflect on the great ways they contribute to the family unit, or even just showing up on a day-to-day basis, because we know that when families are in crisis, it's very difficult to see the protective factors that family provides. And so our family advocate really helps the family and supports them with that. And it really builds on the family's trust and communication and relationship with the caregiver. And in Latinx communities, there is like this hierarchy. And so we also, Laura has the opportunity that these family meetings keep people accountable because sometimes in our culture, Latinx culture, young people are seen as someone who does not have reason over their elders. And so our family advocates really had that conversation and how to keep accountable so that caregivers and young people are both at the table learning from each other. And like I said, our family meetings where that family advocate facilitates is an opportunity to share resources with the caregiver. And especially when caregivers we have seen have a fear of their young people coming out, it's mainly because of fear. because they see all the hate crimes happening. And when you provide these resources, education resources, or connection to other organizations, it really takes this fear away from families and helps them better support their LGBTQIA plus youth. And then community. We recognize that the importance of community assets. I think we live in a society where maybe our physical, emotional, mental health, our physical, emotional, mental health is tied to where we live, so our zip code. And that's just because, like we talked about earlier, systemic barriers. There's a lot of systemic racism happening, environmental racism, barriers that Black and Brown and Indigenous communities are always put up against. But like I said before, it's always important to discuss the beauty and resilience in communities and the protective factors that we saw earlier, especially focusing on the Latinx community. It can look like supporting the youth, finding a supportive adult who has gone through a similar situation, who they can relate to. Our program is only 6 months, and so we know that we can't be that supportive adult. So we really try to find those natural supports that are more longer term for the young person. And supporting the young person in their identity exploration or helping them connect to resources that can provide them this type of support. And then when the young person feels like they belong or are part of the community, they begin to feel empowered on who they are, empowered to care and help in the growth and protection of their own community. And so this, in finding a supportive adult for a young person, it can look like a space where BIPOC, LGBTQIA plus folks are part of. So finding that welcoming community with similar experiences that the young person can relate to. Next slide, please. Lara touched a little bit about this, but in our agency, we're really focused on having all our employees trauma-informed care. And this is an important one because it's important not to cause harm to the young person and families by re-traumatizing. Trauma-informed care is really about meeting people where they're at and respecting their boundaries. And one thing that's really left behind in trauma-informed care, most trainings, is the importance of intersectionalities, as Laura discussed earlier. The young person and families work with a variety that we work with come with a variety of life experience, so it's important to support that family in the way they need to be supported, because supporting one family looks very different from another, even when they're both Spanish-speaking families. Like I said, the Latinx community is very diverse. We're not monolithical. We're a community of different cultures, races, languages, experiences. And so when we focus on trauma-informed care, we really focus on building a relationship with that young person and their family, so we can have like a better insight into how to go about providing them with services that they need and want. Next slide, please. And then finally, we have positive youth development, which goes, I think, hand in hand with asset-based approach. By supporting young people and building up the life skills that they might need. Physical development, so that includes good health habits. Maybe this looks like providing inclusive sex education to our young people, good health and risk management skills. Under intellectual development, knowledge of essential life skills, whether that's like riding the bus, how to get an ID, how to register maybe for online schooling. Our family advocates do that. So school success, critical thinking and reasoning skills. So really using that prefrontal lobe of young people and trying to maybe in the past and then their families trying to navigate that and talking about, their feelings, what does emotional regulation looks like, and good decision-making skills. And also with our Latinx youth, skills to navigate multicultural context. So we know that code switching is very real, especially if young people are trying to look for a job. We really need to provide that and not keep all that information on maybe how to best write a resume, and really supporting in them so that they can succeed in the real world. And then physiological, emotional development. So good mental health, including positive self-regard, emotional self-regulation skills, and coping skills. Next slide, please.
Okay, so today we have Marco. He will be sharing his story with us about his experience at Cocoon House and his time working with me. So I'm just going to be asking some questions and he will be answering them. And if you have any questions for Marco, then we can go ahead and address those at the end of the presentation where we have allotted some time. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Marco. I'm part of the Latino and also part of the LGBT plus community. I am currently a part-time student at the Edmonds Community College.
Can you tell us how you came across Cocoon House?
My therapist at the time, about a year ago, recommended Cocoon House when we had discussed the situation at my home.
What does it look like working, or what did it look like working weekly with me?
Well, at first we met publicly with my mom because I felt more comfortable speaking my truth outside of my house. Once we had a few meetings, I started feeling more comfortable being myself and talking about myself. Our meetings were about problem solving and having better communication and finding resources.
What was the most impactful, or what was the most helpful support you received from me?
Laura gave us many resources to help my family with our mental health and also financially. What was most impactful was the help we received so my mom and I would better understand each other.
What has improved in your life from the time you first met Cocoon House until now?
The relationship with my mom has improved because of our meetings, and I now feel safer living with my family.
Would you recommend Cocoon House services? Or why would you recommend Cocoon House services? Sorry.
Cocoon House offers so many resources for almost any situation you can imagine. I was helped financially and in my education and for my mental health. Housing was also an available option if I needed.
What would you tell a young person who was in your same shoes?
There is a lot of support at Cocoon House to help you get support, and there are people who care for you here and will advocate for your safety.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
That's all I can think of.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Next slide, please. Here we have some resources that I use during my case management with families. First, we have a video. It's a YouTube video about sexual diversity. It is in Spanish, but you can always use closed caption so that it will translate. It's a really good resource for families that have come in and don't understand anything about the LGBTQ community. It's a quick little intro to what it is and where you can get some help. There are also many worksheets you can find online to hand out to youth and their families. First, we have Somos Familia. As you can see to the right of the screen here, this is one of the worksheets that I get from there, or it's not a worksheet, it's just a sheet that talks about inclusive language. And it's all in Spanish. And that way the youth can use it to discuss their identity with the parents and can actually give them a handout of like, this is what it is, and here's how you can use it. Familia es Familia is another resource, just about the same. These two websites really can help you in guiding parents specifically whose youth have recently discussed their identity with them or have come out to them. In specific, Somos Familia has a part in their website where you can click and it says, my youth came out, what now? And it takes you step by step through what you can do. And it has videos and resources. It's a really helpful website. The other thing I also wanted to add is that on YouTube, it's really, really nice to find videos. One that has been super helpful for me and families is the biology of transsexuality. A lot of parents know what is first presented to them. And then they're like, but how? I want to understand the science behind it. And so it's really nice to find those videos. They've been helpful for me. They've been helpful for parents. And specifically also parents who have youth who identify as non-binary. That is a conversation that we have had. And there are one that I just found out about not that long ago is it's a website, Why Pronouns Matter, and it breaks down why it matters. So if you are able to go on there and translate that information, it's also really helpful for Spanish-speaking families. And lastly, local support. We have a lot of local support in our area where you can have parents go to for parent support groups and youth support groups. And, you know, as always, mental health resources for the family and the youth. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we finished our presentation and we wanted to allocate some time for questions at the end. Please feel free to put them in the chat or come off mic for either maybe Laura, myself, or Marco. I just want to make it aware, Marco, thank you for sharing your story. You have a lot of applause if you want to look in the chat.
I was just showing him that.
Don't be shy, any questions? Yep, feel free to unmute or drop any questions in the chat. Have some. Okay, so as a white counselor, I'm always trying to be aware of my own privilege. However, one of my worries that it will come off as initializing or patronizing. Yeah. How do you find the line between those? I want my clients to feel empowered in their identities and ethnicity. Thank you for sharing, Micah. To better understand your question, Micah, if it's okay if you come off mic, could you give an example? Are you talking about providing young people and their families with resources, connecting them with the resources, or providing them support? Yeah, I'm trying to understand in the interactions.
So I would like to speak on the next question with Miguel. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It's Miguel. Yes.
Okay, sorry. And that's my dad's name, so I'm pronouncing it how my dad would pronounce his name. The way that I handle a situation, if it were to come up, is helping people understand why the term that they are using can be harmful. And that is like really honestly the best way to go about it, is doing the research, helping people understand, and then helping them or guiding them in what is a better term to use. I haven't had any experience with caregivers, being, not okay with it or struggling with it. As long as you sit down and have like an honest conversation with them, where you're not like calling them out in a really rude way or just telling them that they're wrong, they tend to be very accepting and actually want to learn, and are very appreciative that you come and give them the information and instead of telling them you shouldn't do that.
Thank you.
Going back to the first question, I'm just gonna answer it, Micah, in general terms. I think as someone, if you said you identify as you're a white counselor, I think just being aware, like you said, of your privilege, and also just hearing the young person. Most of the time, families and young people want to be listened to, because in many instances, their voices have not been heard. And it could change from situation to situation. Like we said, today we were presenting on Latinx communities, but we also are not the experts. Like I said before, we come from different races, cultures, languages, and it's very difficult to serve one family, as you probably know as a counselor. One way is really asking the person, how can I best support you? And making it all possible to have low barriers to that support. Hopefully that answers your question.
Hey, I guess what I was trying to ask was like, so for instance, I'm a trans male, but my counselor is a white cishet man. And it kind of, he's very sweet. Like he's always all about like educating himself and everything, but he's like almost overly cautious, and to the point where like it does sometimes feel a little bit like infantilizing, I guess, or something. Like, so I guess like in recognizing my own privilege as a white person, how do I avoid doing that for clients that are like BIPOC and Latinx? If that makes sense.
Laura, you want to add something?
Well, what I will say is that admitting that you don't know something is not a bad thing. And allowing sometimes the youth and the families to teach you something new, like always be open to that. And I think as far as, as long as you do that, going into the conversation with parents, like they'll understand, and they will appreciate that you are willing to learn. Like always be willing to learn, instead of making assumptions. Like that's the first place to start. And just knowing, just for as long as I've been doing this work and I've been working with families, families appreciate you being straightforward and like admit that you made a mistake. Like people really appreciate that. Making mistakes happen and making assumptions happens. So just be willing to be vulnerable and accepting that you made a mistake. I think that kind of answers, I think Meston asked a question about advice for a non-Latinx person to build trust within the community and to help feel more comfortable. Like if you're going into a community, a Latinx community specific, don't go in there assuming that you know everything. If you can learn the language, maybe just even a few phrases like hello, how are you doing, how can I help, that will definitely be very helpful, very welcoming to individuals. I know we had a person within Cocoon House who went to an all Spanish speaking event, and then they showed up and they couldn't speak the language, and somebody did mention like, how are you going to come into our community and not speak Spanish? That's very, very important. Yeah, and I hope that my answer was helpful, Micah.
No, it super was. Thank you so much.
The next question we have in the chat, by Ryan, what are some of the barriers and successful strategies of overcoming familial division and support reconnection? Laura, you have recent stories, so I'm gonna turn this question to you.
I read that again. Gosh, there's so many. But ultimately, it's really just sitting down and with families. Well, for myself, I have family meetings, and it's trying your best to advocate for both of the people that you are advocating for, youth and the parent, and helping them understand that they are each struggling and helping them validate each other. That is really important. And one of the things that I always tell families who are struggling, it's not you against the other person, it's you against this problem that you are facing or this misunderstanding that you are facing. And that always, bringing them always back to that always really, really helps, and helping them remember that they love each other, that they care about each other, and that really they're just trying to figure out how to meet in the middle or maybe even solve the problem. Successful strategies is just meeting with them on a regular basis, making sure that the resources that you are handing out to them are being contacted, always letting them know why it's important that they get in contact with the resources. And really, when I do case management with families, we talk about everything, how, you know, nutrition affects your body, affects your mental health, how making sure that you're going to your checkups is really important and can help have a better, you know, cohesive family relationship. We go over ACEs, adolescent brain development. Everything is out there for the youth and the parents to learn. And we really try to leave no stone unturned. You know, all the questions that they may have, we get them answered. And by this end of the 6 months, you know, we hope that they're connected to all of those resources, and, you know, our job is not as needed anymore.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I wouldn't have add anything else. I think our biggest thing in reconnection is those family meetings that are crucial that Laura has, and kind of facilitating them, but then allowing them to facilitate afterwards so that it could be something that they, from now, after they're done with Cocoon House, they continue on. Because in those family meetings, you really learn to provide those families with the tools to keep these conversations going, to keep an open communication, which often in the Latinx communities is something we are not taught. We're not taught to learn about our feelings. We're not taught to maybe challenge elders or folks. And so sitting at the table together and having the opportunity for the young person to have their voice heard, and then the caregivers and family realizing that, you know, they just needed to be listened to, and they had and they start to understand more where the young person's coming from. Thank you. Hopefully that answered your question. The next one I have is, what is your advice for a non-Latinx to build trust within the community to help them feel more comfortable? A big one, like Laura said, not everyone speaks Spanish, but the majority speak Spanish. And providing resources, whether that's a flyer, a pamphlet, classes in their language, is very important for you to start connecting with the community. And that means contracting someone outside of your organization to do the translation. It's a big equity piece that we have fought also in Cocoon House, Laura and myself, you know, talking about equity between our bilingual staff that have a job to do and aren't getting paid extra for their bilingualism. So now in leadership, we're trying to change that. So really thinking about this a bit, being equitable when providing those services to your families, and not just because it's the right thing and an equitable thing to do, but also it's better for the families. A lot of us who are bilingual grew up knowing conversational Spanish. And so when we have like parenting classes, and it's a lot about the development of adolescence and the stages, it's a lot of academia and words that may have not come in our time, you know, and we can't translate that. And so if we try to, as someone who's bilingual, try to translate that for families, we're not being equitable in the form that we're serving them because we're not giving them fully the information that they need. So for me, that's a big thing in connecting with the community. And I think Laura mentioned that. Anything else, Laura, that you would add?
No, I mean, I think as far as translation, also when it comes to academic vocabulary, it's we got to remember the educational side of it. If you have someone who's interpreting or translating and they're using academic language, you have to make sure that, hey, if you are a parent who maybe didn't finish the 5th grade and you speak Spanish, you might not know these words. So making sure that it's accessible for parents. I know that one time I was translating something and then I went to my parents and I was like, hey, do you understand what I'm saying here? And they're like, not really, I've never heard that word before. So it's just like getting that input from parents in the community, whether they understand what you're trying to even tell them in the first place. But yeah, that was just my addition to that.
I remember someone mentioned about links, so I'm gonna make sure y'all Dash and the team can send out those links that we have in our PowerPoint. And yes, we do provide shelter through RHY funding.
The next question by Raven is, they get to summarize this training on Friday for their staff meeting. If there was one thing you would emphasize or would like them to know, what would it be? Intersectionality is very, 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 very important. I don't know how many varies I have to add to that, but it's so important in our work. Yes.
You actually took mine. So I think it needs to be double emphasized. It's like any other family you work with. I think as a Latinx community, we're grouped into one place. And that's very important to stay away from and very dangerous, because even it's backfired on me when I've worked with Latinx families, because families come from different cultures and ways of growing up, and their way that they were parented was caregivers is very different from mine. And so just being that person and listening and understanding the intersectionalities that go into play.
Additionally, Raven, to your last question of what are some challenges you face when providing services in these types of communities, I'm just
And Laura, can you also define intersectionality? Sorry.
So intersectionalities are where our identities meet or intersect. Like myself, my identity is I am Mexican American woman. That's how I identify myself. I'm also a non-binary individual, and I have disabilities, and you know, like there's so many parts of my identity that intersect, and at which people can also experience trauma. So we need to make sure that we are, you know, when we are working with families, that we are mindful of where their intersectionalities meet, that they can be experiencing trauma. So intersectionality, you know, I just think about it as where people's identities meet, that they can experience trauma. And so what are some challenges that I face when providing services is finding Spanish resources. So when I do case management, I do case management with English speaking families, and I have materials for that. And then those materials that I find in Spanish, I often cannot, or in English, I often cannot find in Spanish. And so sometimes I have youth that are fluent in Spanish, English, and I'm teaching them something, but when it comes to teaching the parent, I can't find those resources translated exactly. And so then it lands on me to make sure that I'm finding things that are translated exactly so that both parties are getting the same information. And that is really hard because in Latinx culture, we're not having a lot of conversations about mental health and intersectionality. I had to search so much to find out like how to talk to someone in Spanish about gaslighting. And so it those things are like, you know, it makes you understand that these conversations are not happening. And if they are happening, it's a very like, you have to search for them out there. So that is like one of my biggest challenges, is finding resources in Spanish.
I know we're running out of time. Dash, how much time do we have? Can we answer a couple more questions?
So we're at 3 minutes. Probably one last question.
Okay.
I have a question. Hi, my name is Sherry. I work at a runaway homeless youth shelter in New Jersey. My question was, do you find yourself as an organization receiving more walk-ins or through referrals for your for the beds, your shelter beds?
Yeah, so we have a lot of referrals, mainly from schools. But I think it's half and half, because as in walk-ins, we have parents and caregivers and families call in, or we have also, we have partnerships, like I said, with schools, with the Juvenile Detention Center here in Snohomish County. Yeah. Is there something else you want me to clarify? Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
Dash, is there a way I could email folks? I can send my email also on the chat, and if you all want to send me your questions, me and Laura would be happy to answer them, because we are running out of time. But thank you all for engaging and having these conversations with Laura and I.